Blake, obviously, another not a good day at the office. I'm sure it's disappointing. So I think the discipline, I suppose, that's a one question. I mean, 20 penalties, and it's probably what cost you.
Yeah. So, Jan, look, I mean, it's just chatted to the ref. I thought the ref he ref really well. He was very clear about what he allowed and what he didn't allow. And, that they play a lot of power. They got unbelievable power in their pack and in their backs as well. Look at the size of their back. So you can't play with 13 men and try and stop their power game. Thought we did well for the first 30 minutes when we kept the ball and moved them around a bit. But as soon as we got down to 13 and they put their foot on the gas in the 22 there, I mean, that half went on for about another 6-7 minutes. And, that was probably the beginning of us having to catch up. And once we had to catch up against them, although we scored a great try from our own half, I mean, it's probably going to be one of the tries of the season. It's obviously it wasn't good enough.
I was about to ask you, I mean, at 27 minutes, you were leading 13-6, and it was a commendable first half an hour. But then for 15 minutes, they scored 3 tries. And, I mean, obviously, then you chased the game, and the guys seemed like, I wouldn't say nervous or over-eager, but they were just not as focused as they were in that first half an hour.
Well, Jan, I mean, as I said, I mean, exactly that. 27 minutes, we looked like we were in control. And then we lost the line out by knocking it on. We got a scrum penalty against us, and then they kicked it in the corner, and then we just basically on the back foot. As I said, it becomes once they play their power game, once they get the ball in the 22 there and they use their pack of forwards, it's, they're good enough to score against anybody. So, once that sort of opportunity came to them and they repeated it, it was difficult for us. It was very, very difficult for us to stop their power. It was difficult enough with 15. It was almost impossible with 13.
The final one from me, it's 2 big games or 2 games against big teams, very strong teams, loaded with Springboks. How easy is it to turn around? I know you can't buy experience, you can't buy what those teams have. How easy is it to turn it around and still make a success of this season?
Yeah, well, I mean, we'll get it right. I mean, it doesn't, that's one thing about sport. It takes a while, and you say it, clearly it's 2 massive teams with lots and lots of test experience. This time last year, we were in the same boat, also bottom of the log, also feeling like whether we were going to see the playoffs. And that's the character of what we got to do. We got to now look inward and see where we can improve. Some things you can't fast track. You saw today again. I was speaking to Kaya Malatona, and he was saying to me, young front row, and then when you get a pack of 5 Springboks, it becomes difficult. So and you can't fast track that, Jan. I mean, there's nothing I can do. At the end of the day, those guys have to grow and develop, and it's tough. I mean, it's obviously very tough. You don't want to be at the end of that. But sometimes you got to give credit. There's a tough place to play. Very good team. Once they turned the screws and they got their tails in front, and we had to catch up, and they could carry on with their power game. It was obviously, it became an uphill battle, and I thought we fought quite bravely from our own half a couple of times. They defended unbelievably well on our try line. Had we made 1 or 2 more passes, maybe we'd have scored another long-range try. But sometimes, Jan, I can't make up things. I mean, it is what it is. We got another 3 away games in January, so it's not going to get any easier. We just got to make sure that we improve every week.
Jake, just almost an extension a bit on Jan's question. You talk about experience, and I mean, I'm not trying to suggest that they unduly influenced or anything, but it was noticeable that the Sharks used their grizzled Springboks to be more street smart, with Morris, particularly just in being vocal and that type of thing, almost like, just sort of like making their voices heard. Now, what I wanted to ask is that sort of like also the type of thing which you talk about, when you say, you have a young squad, that's sort of like the type of nuance that that Arua, Norki, and those guys will probably only have to start learning, well, they have to start learning, but it only comes, with time, I suppose.
Heinz, I mean, you saw it. I didn't say it. I mean, that's how it works. We probably had the rub of the green when we had Dwayne Vermeulen captaining our Curry Cup team. And we won those 2 Curry Cups. And that's what happens. You get a older, wiser, little bit more, I suppose, respected captain. And then you probably get 1 or 2 things, that would have gone against you, maybe, for you, or maybe. So, yeah, I mean, it's part of the learning process. And as I said, you can't fast forward it. There's nothing you can do. It's not like tomorrow morning you get up and, your players are all older and wiser and, and they learn those things along the way. I mean, that's time on the clock. They've got to go through this. It's painful. I mean, it's painful in a season for you to go through things like this. But, I'm confident that Heinz will get it right. I'm confident that there's a group they work hard. They're a good bunch of guys. They're hurting when they don't do well. And that's all you can ask for.
Jake, even though it was a bit of a mixed bag for him personally, 2 yellow cards, I would probably personally think, that the first one was maybe a bit more instinctive than anything else. But just in terms of attack, Keenan Moody is just like, he's evolving, with every game. It just seems that he's basically the heart, of that Bulls attack at times. I know, even though it's a team effort.
Yeah, Heinz, look, I mean, I'm sure you can imagine he's feeling down now. He's obviously a very young lad and he's obviously very impressionable, as you know. And it's a lesson for him too. I thought he was a bit unlucky in that first yellow card. I went to see the ref after the game to thank him, and I said to the TMO and the referees, I thought that he, understand by the letter of the law, but they weren't going to score there. I mean, I think Nochi was running on the touchline so he would have stepped out so I thought the yellow was probably a bit unfortunate. And then, I mean, the yellow card was a yellow. So it isn't ideal, but he'll learn, Heinz, he'll learn. Again, another example of what I'm talking about. He'll learn, he'll be better for this. He'll be much better as a player. He'll be much better as a rugby player for us as well.
Hi, Jake. I've got 2 questions. First of all, the focus obviously will now shift towards the Heineken Cup. If I'm not correct, please correct me. And if I'm correct, you will obviously look towards your more inexperienced players, if I can use that expression.
Okay, so Simon, just to set the record straight, we leave tomorrow. I mean, on Monday, we fly via Dubai to London bus to Wales. We play Dragons next Friday night, which is a URC game. And then we come back. And then we have Exeter at home, which is an EPCR game.
But that doesn't make it easier for you, Jake, I suppose.
No. Well, I mean, that's why I was saying earlier that it's, the next month we've got Dragons away, Exeter at home, Leon away, and Scarlets away. So I mean, it's the block that's the toughest for us. The 6-week, 7-week block, it's the toughest for us. Not that the others aren't tough, but I mean, if you look at 6 away games out of 7. A lot of traveling, so it's not going to get any easier, but this will be a massive character test for us as a group, both coaches and players to obviously start the new year with a bit of energy and hopefully get both our campaigns on track.
Last question from me, Jake, on the red card rule or the head collision rule. Obviously, there has to be some talks to be made or discussions to be made between players, coaches, and the guys that lay down the law as far as that is concerned because of interpretation. I suppose that we will talk about this much more in future. You've made mention of Keenan that he, and I suppose by him, you include also some of the other players will learn, like Marco in the previous game against the DHL Stormers as well.
Yep, Simon, and I will repeat what I said to you last week. There's a massive push in rugby for head injuries. There's a movie that came out, Concussion, that was obviously very, very big in American football. I think the lawmakers and people that are involved in our game are massively aware of dropping body heights. We are fully aware of that. And we'll have to learn. Those are the laws, and those are the ways they want the laws to be blown, and they want you to play within those laws. Then that's fine. But as I said, it's I'm not going to cover for at the end of the day. We got to work on getting the technique right and making sure that we don't get yellow or worse when we're in those collision situations.
Hi, Jake. First Sandy Park, now Kings Park. You seem to take 40, and what's the similarities in both those scores and in the name of those venues? What's going on with the defense, and do you think it's something that needs to be sorted immediately? You say the 7-week block is going to be tough with 6 away games. Surely you don't want to continue leaking as much, considering especially that Rowan Janse van Rensburg last-minute try was quite disappointing.
What's intercept? It's intercept. That's got nothing to do with defense. I mean, the reality is you score intercept try, you can't blame the defense. And we had the ball, so...
Yeah.
Look, I think, if I listen to you, then I mustn't go stand on the top of a building, because, you make it sound as though, the reality is Exeter Chiefs have won the Champions Cup. The Sharks are probably the most laden test team that we play against in South Africa. If I understand your sentiment, but at the same time, you can't play with 13 men, give them a 30-13 start at halftime and expect that you're going to roll them over at home, So no, I'm not going to go and stand on top of a building now and feel like the whole world's on me. There's a long season. The boys are hurting. They're not happy with the way we defended either. But as I said, once there's power and there's power and there's power, you can't stop power. And that's the Sharks game. The irony about tonight for me, Caleb, is we beat the Sharks with a bonus point at Loftus. So as it stands now, we're almost identical with them and us. We beat Cardiff. They lost to Cardiff. They've still got to play the Stormers twice. There's so much more permutations that can happen. So it's not a case of now saying, you lost to the Sharks with whatever points, therefore the season's finished. There's a lot of rugby left. Stormers have got to play Sharks twice. They've still got a tour. We've still got a tour. There's teams that are still permutations of beating each other and changing the log in terms of positions on the log. So we just got to make sure that we travel well next week and we prepare well next week in a really short turnaround week, and make sure that we, as I said, get our campaign back on track next Friday night.
Yeah, just Jake, quickly, in terms of the context of South African rugby, it's the first time we've had a New Year's game, and we had 25,000 show up in in Durban today. What does it make the players feel like in terms of playing during this festive season and our representation in Europe, and in terms of us going forward for a long-term context of the game in South Africa?
Caleb, good question. Good question. I know there's a lot of talk from the URC about is South Africa's participation, etc., on track, and I can tell you, if I've looked at all these derby games over the festive period, whether it's Connacht or Leinster, or whether it's, local derbies like Zebra and Benetton, whatever, it's wonderful to see that these local derbies over this festive period have been fruitful. You look last week, 30,000 in Cape Town. And you said 30,000 today. It's fantastic for rugby this time of the year. I think it'll grow. I think it'll grow as people understand more and more about how the competition works. Some people are still asking me about where does EPCR fit in and how can you play in the middle of URC, etc. I think once the South African public understand what's happening, and once they see the sort of back end of the competition and the ability for teams to do well against each other, the one thing about URC, which is significantly different, is you can win away from home, and you can have teams that, sort of towards the bottom can win games. So it's different. I must say to you, it's very different. I think it's different for us as well, because remember, we travel both times to the coastal area. So, if you're at the coastal area, you're probably still staying at home. You still, routine's probably a little bit similar. For us, it's obviously the travel, but I understand why. If we'd played at Loftus, I'm not sure how many people would have come to Loftus today, because everyone's on holiday down the coast. So it is what it is. As I said to you, it's the tough 6-7 weeks that we've got. We've just got to make sure at the end of January that we've regrouped and we've given ourselves a chance for the back end of the comp.